Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today I want to take a moment and talk about Max Holloway because after his fight recently, he said he advises young fighters not to be doing lots of hard sparring, to try and, let's see, as he puts it, you want to figure out how to take less damage. So I want to take a moment today to share with you guys if I agree with his opinion and what I do for my sparring and how it has changed throughout the years. This is a very important subject. Let's jump into it right now. Alright guys, the first thing I want to say to most people when they hear this is an elite fighter. Max Holloway, former UFC champion for so long. We are talking about an elite guy. Somebody who's been around the block, who's put in probably so many hard rounds. I mean, Max seems like an awesome guy, but you can tell maybe he's been hit a few too many times in sparring. Because let's be real, even though you take impact when you fight, the accumulation of the damage you're going to take is generally from sparring. Because a lot of guys are sparring all year long. You're doing what, 2-3 nights of sparring, maybe putting in 5 to 10 rounds. If you add that up, it doesn't compare whatsoever. Even if you're a UFC champion, you're fighting 25 minutes 3 times. You're only doing a little bit over an hour of actual competition per year. And that's assuming the fight doesn't finish early and you score a win with a knockout or submission. So I love his statement because it points out in particular that you want to protect your brain in the gym. And this is something I've been an advocate for a long time, and I've tried both spectrums of sparring really hard and almost not sparring at all. And I'm going to share that with you guys and how it worked for me. So let's go back to the very beginning of my career, super early. I wasn't even actually actively competing at the time. And at that point, probably between, let's say, 16 and 20, when I wasn't actually competing, I was just going into the gym for fun. The sparring got pretty heated. You know, you're young, there's guys there who are older than you, they tag you, you want to tag them back. As I got better and better, I started beating people and they wanted to try and take my head off. And I really didn't know or was confident enough at the time to tell people, you know, whoa, we need to lighten up a little bit. So I spent much of my young career having people swing at me really hard. Now, fortunately, I was good enough that I didn't take a whole lot of clean shots. But as you hopefully know by now, with science that is being released, it is not always the big impacts, but it's the small impacts, the accumulation of damage, which is very dangerous for the head. Now, to be completely honest, that is not the reason that I started doing lighter sparring. For me, I love pad work. I love the running. Maybe not in the, the midst or the last week or two of training camp when I'm exhausted, but for me, that's my passion. The sparring is fun, but when I go in for hard sparring, it gets me pretty nervous and I don't really enjoy it. So as soon as I was going, okay, you know what, I'm good enough, I have a glory contender title. Oh, now I have a glory belt. I started to realize that I didn't need to be sparring hard, putting in loads of rounds every week, and it was okay to dial back. But that also may have been just because I really didn't enjoy that time and I put my emphasis on things I really did like. Well, of course, being realistic and going, you know what, I should probably keep sparring fairly hard, fairly consistently, but I only did it when I had a fight coming. I would have my fight camp 10 weeks. Usually the first couple weeks are to get in shape, then maybe 6 to 7 weeks of decently hard sparring, and then I wouldn't spar again until my next training camp. But if you are new, if you are trying to build up, you're trying to get better, you're trying to make improvements, if you stop sparring, I really believe that improvement level, that trajectory upwards is not going to be as steep. Just sort of plateau, maybe a little bit of a rise. Sparring is definitely very important. Don't stop doing it, but I will give you my advice on when it's time to pick it up and when you should be going light. So if you're one of those young lions, you're up and coming, you're just like, I'm gonna go into the gym every night, I just wanna bang away, I don't care. At some point, that's gonna catch up to you. So what you really wanna do, what I do, what has served me very, very well, is concentrating my sparring into a small period of time and using the rest of the time to focus on technique, timing, just improving in general. Now, like I said, I have tried the limited sparring, and the first time I ever did it was when I was fighting for, I think it was my second glory title against Adam Chuck. And I knew in preparation for him, because I'd already fought him once before and lost a very, very close decision, but I knew the key to victory was not going to be that grinding style. I didn't need to be super tough. I didn't need to be super durable. I needed to be smart. So we put the emphasis in the camp on very little sparring, very little hard sparring at all. I think probably 99% of the camp was just practicing drills over and over with somebody maybe throwing back at me occasionally, but very little open sparring. sparring. And it worked great. Everything felt fine. I was on point. But then after, I went to defend that belt against Ruben van Roosmalen, and I made the mistake of not conditioning my body the same way that I used to. And because that guy is just a tank, he's just trekking forward, after the second or third round, I went, oh, everything's hurting and I'm just not as strong. I'm just not as capable of absorbing the impact that I normally am. The most important part of this conversation is light sparring, I think, is good all the time. Hard sparring, to completely get rid of it, to never do it, I don't think you really want to be doing that unless you're so up there in skill level. And if we're talking about myself, we're talking about some of the other guys in the world who are in the UFC, who are former UFC champions, by all means, once you get to that level, you are at the top of the game. And even if you don't spar and you sneak down, you're just a little bit less than your best version, you're 99% out of 100, that is still enough for you to get the win. For a lot of other people, if your performance out of 100 is more like 70 and you don't spar and that drops you down to like a 65 or something, that might not be enough for you to get the win. So I'm not trying to tell you guys exactly what to do. I'm just telling you what I've done. I've tried the light sparring. It worked fairly well until I fought a brawler, a guy who was strong and my body felt unconditioned. But it's also worked when I went against a guy who was more technical and I didn't really need to have my body conditioned in the same way. But I have learned that sparring all year long, hard all the time, I've never taken massive impact, but I know long-term it's not going to be good for me, and I would advise everybody else out there to tone down the sparring in between fight camps. And then when you're, 5 weeks away from fight camp, do some hard rounds. Now, how many rounds do I do per week? That's very important. I would say 2 times per week in camp, starting about 7 weeks out from the fight up to about 1 week before when I start tapering. That gives me about 6 weeks of training there. 2 times a week, I will do fairly hard sparring. I usually do no more than 5 rounds. And this is me coming from Victoria, getting on a ferry, traveling over to Vancouver to do sparring rounds with Josh Johnsey. By the time I leave my house and I actually get to his gym, we're talking probably 4 hours. Then I do a warm-up, I spar 5 little rounds, and then I do the whole trip back. And I'm sure lots of people are probably like, dude, you went all the way there. Why don't you spar 10 rounds? Why don't you do 12? Well, honestly, we go pretty hard. Josh and I, we're banging away on each other. We're not trying to knock each other out to the head, but the shots are definitely enough that if you take impact, your head's moving, and that is damage. So I try to minimize all that, and it's just about me getting that body conditioning, really working my timing at full speed, and just really giving myself an opportunity to mimic fight night. So really during the 6 weeks of sparring, I am probably doing 10 rounds a week max. Probably somewhere between 50 and 60 rounds throughout my whole fight camp. And again, I'm not banging. I'm not going with guys who are trying to knock me out. I know, like, every once in a while I get a boxer from somewhere else out of town and they come in and I do some sparring with them and I ask their coach, how hard do you want to go? How hard does your student want to spar? And they just go, it's a fight. Knock each other down, do what you can. Okay, if that's what you guys want to do. I mean, it doesn't matter to me too much because I'm doing this once or twice per year where I'm actually trying to knock people down to the body. And even in those instances where I'm going with somebody who's trying to rip my head off, I still have issues with really landing full shots and following through to the head. I will generally pull my shots because I just don't really want to concuss somebody in sparring rounds. But that's just me, guys, and I gotta say, I agree with Max in some sense. I wouldn't say stop sparring, especially if you're trying to get better and better. You're looking for big improvements over the next year or two. You need to be sparring fairly consistently, but you can tone it down. Not every sparring match needs to be like a fight, and you don't need to be destroying your partner or yourself every time you go to the gym. Because like he said, you want to be in this game for a long time. Yes, that's true. I want to be in this sport for a long time. More important to me, I have a long life after competition. I want to be able to enjoy my life and not be walking around with headaches, vision problems, everything else that goes with concussions. It's sad when you hear about people who finish their career and have that damage to their brain. So let's all find some medium point between what Max is saying and what a lot of other people are doing. We kind of meet in the middle. You have to do hard sparring rounds. I do believe it's a must until you hit that top level. And even for myself, I've been there. I've been the #1 kickboxer in the world. I never really pulled back 100% except for that one fight against Adam Chuck and then the follow-up fight, which made me realize I can't not spar. I need to do some hard rounds. They just need to be very, very minimal. And the rest of the time I'm working with my guys back at home, the guys I've been working with for years. We know how to pull shots. Nobody ever gets hurt. For one of my most recent fight camps, I had the first time ever, I've been sparring with one guy, Greg Lamotte, for I want to say almost 8 years now. We've been going back and forth, helping each other out for fights. First time ever that I've been injured by him, I took a little elbow and I got a cut on my forehead. That's not bad for the amount of rounds we've done back and forward. And it's because we put the pace on each other, but we're nice and we pull shots and we're not actually trying to hurt one another. That's what a good sparring partner should do for you. And it's up to you guys to put yourself in front of good sparring partners. Don't go with guys who are, 70 pounds heavier who are trying to knock you out. If you're the bigger fighter, don't try and knock out the smaller fighters. You've got to be aware of your size, you've got to be aware of your skill difference, and you've got to be aware that you're protecting yourself and everybody else in the gym. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my take on whether sparring is important or not, whether you should be doing it or not. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, get subscribed, train hard, guys, and I'll see you back here soon for another video.